All right, I'm glad you came back. In this video, we're going to talk about list comprehensions. This may take a little bit to get fully comprehend, but please take your time and watch this video as many times as you need. I will tell you one of the best ways to get through this is to practice. So, a list comprehension is a concise expression that creates a new list by iterating over the elements of an existing list. This is an example. The following code uses a for loop to make a copy of a list. So we have a list 1 where we've set up the values 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we create an empty list, and then we use this for loop to take all the items in list 1 and append them to list 2. So I want you to take a moment and see this piece in this for loop, the item in list 1. The following code uses a list comprehension to make a copy of that list. So here we have list 1, which is our original list, and we created the 1, 2, 3, 4 like we did above. In list 2, we're using a comprehension in the brackets to create that list 2. Let's dive into this a little bit more. So on a list comprehension, the expression is broken down into two specific spots. First, we have the results of the expression, and then we have the iteration expression. Let's always look at the iteration expression first. So this iteration expression says 4 items, let me erase that because that was supposed to be blue. There we go. So 4 item in list 1. Our previous list was list 1, and we know that when we're doing an iteration, item becomes the item that we pull out one at a time from the list 1. Now, with that being said, that's great, but we want to be able to also do things, manipulate this item. So what happens is the system takes this item and puts it in this result expression. By doing that, we can do things to this result expression before it gets stored into our list. So let's take a look at some examples of that. In this example, we have our list, which is 1, 2, 3, and 4. The first thing we're going to do is say what our iterative piece is to this. So for each item in this list 1, pull each item, right? So that's going to take the item from each of the list. Now remember, it will then store it in our results that allows us to then manipulate it. And whatever the manipulation occurs is the item that actually gets stored in the new list. So in this example, each item is going to be iterated over. So first we'll have 1 come in, which then gets stored into this. We are doing this times 2 piece of code, which is squared. It's not, we're squaring it. So star is square. So item, which is 1, squared is 1. The next item that comes up is 2, which goes into our results. Squared 2 is 4, 3 is 9, and then 4 is 16. So that's why the results of list 2 will look like 1, 4, 9, and 16. So with this, our first list, the string list, is Wilkin, Blinken, and Nod. Lincoln, Blinken, and Nod. And with our comprehension, we're going to split it right there. We're going to say for each item in the list, and again, we just have a variable there. This is one of those examples where Oftentimes you'll see single letter variables. This just stands for the item in the list that's going to get pulled out. It's going to get pulled out and put into the len function. So as you can see, let me redraw that and reiterate what we're saying here. So S is our placeholder, and it's being pulled out into our results expression. And the results expression, because we can do things on the results, we're actually just saying, hey, what's the length of the S item that we're pulling out for each item? And whenever we do a length of a string, it's going to give us how many characters are in that string. So that's why len list is now 6, 7, and 3. That's the item stored in len list. You can use the if clause in a list comprehension to select only certain elements when you're processing your list. So let's start with, on this example, this for loop. So we're saying, hey, iterate over each item in list 1 and store each item in n as a placeholder. Then our if statement saying, if whatever's in that n is greater than 10, go ahead and append it to our new list. This is a lot of code when we can do it down here the same way. So in this, we're saying for each item in list 1, then we're saying, hey, if that item is greater than 10, then put that item in the results. And because we're not doing anything to the results, it's going to store it straight into the list 2, or append it straight into list 2. So again, here's our loop. We're going to iterate over every item in the list, putting it into item as a placeholder. And if the item is greater than 10, put it in our results. And because we're not doing anything on the results side, go ahead and store that straight into list 2. So here's an example. Our list 1 has these elements in it: 1, 12, 2, 23, 15, and 4. And we're saying for every item in list 1, if item is greater than 10, then store that in the results side. And because we're not doing anything with the results side, go ahead and store that straight into list 2. Now remember, we could do things on the results side too. Like before, we could have said len item, and then we would have gotten a list of the length of items. Well, this len item in this case wouldn't work because we're dealing with numbers. But if we were dealing with strings, we could do things to the results side. That's the point that I'm trying to make here. But we're not, so wanted to just show that example of how we can do things to the results side even though we're using an if statement. So after this code executes, list 2 will contain 1, 2, 3, 4 because we are asking for all the items that are less than 10. So it's going to pull out 1, 2, 3, and 4 because they are less than 10. When we come back, we're going to talk about two-dimensional list.